Preeti, please start.
Ma'am, am I visible? Yes. A very good morning to all the dignitaries present here. I am extremely pleased to see you all. I, Preeti Dave, welcome you all to this online platform celebrating Shakespeare's birthday, being it a fourth consecutive day of this event. The world is full of diamonds and gems, and here we are talking about a very rare and precious one, that is Shakespeare. Let us remember him through this wonderful opportunity given to us by Shakespeare Society of Central India. In collaboration, we also have Department of English, Hislop College, Nagpur, Santaji Mahavidyalaya, Nagpur, Rajkumar kewalramani Mahavidyalaya, Nagpur, and M Patel Arts, Commerce and Science College, Bhandara. Today I feel special and privileged to be part of such a wonderful occasion, as it is 23rd of April, the very day when Shakespeare was born. For opening remarks, today we have along with us Dr. Prashant Shedge, a renowned and eminent personality in the field of education, leading a very prestigious institute of Nagpur, Hislop College. I invite you, sir, to give an introductory speech.
Preeti, please go ahead. He's not available, okay?
Taking a step ahead, we are here to witness a new discourse, revisiting the early comedies. A reappraisal of Merry Wives of Windsor is yet another aspect of Shakespearean work on which Dr. Krishnan TR will throw the light on. Dr. Krishnan is a professor, Department of English, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kaladi, Kerala. His teaching experience spanned for 27 years, where he had published more than 50 publications in various journals and edited 4 volumes. He had been a resource person to more than 35 seminars. We have, he have worked on 2 research projects. Most importantly, he is an executive member and joint secretary of ISPEL, Indian Society for Promotion of English Language and Literature. We are indeed privileged to have you, sir. Here I invite Dr. Krishnan, sir, for his scholarly presentation.
Thank you. Am I audible there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, first of all, let me thank the organizers, the Shakespeare Society of India, as well as the colleges which are mentioned in the brochure. They have come together for a very important week regarding based on Shakespeare's, like birth days, as well as the anniversary is concerned. And I'm thrilled that I got exactly 23rd, because it's a very auspicious day as far as the proceedings are concerned. Because based on the evidence, I don't know whether it is verifiable, but based on the general notion, it is said that he was born in 23rd and was baptized in 27th. So maybe that way I'm happy that I got exactly the same day that he was born. Now, let me thank Dr. Pranati, Dr. Urmila, Dr. Usha, as well as the managers of this show, Dr. Preeti and Dr. Deepti, who have helped me to begin with this particular discourse. So, without much ado, let me move on to the topic, as I have stated in my presentation, or maybe in the brochure there. Actually, I'm going to speak about comedies, that too based on what we have as an evidence, like the early part of his career, and then moving on to a specific play and a specific character. So that is what my plan is all about. So when we look into the trajectory in which I am going to plan this entire thing, I'll begin with his early days. Maybe the way that he came to means all the way that he came to London during 1590s, early maybe late 1580s or early 1590s, and then up to around 1595. Generally, critics call that as a period of early experimentation. Means from the days wherein which he got associated with a very interesting career called theatre. So when he got into that, suddenly he became quite creative, by which he brought his like new ideas into the theatre. Of course, he read from various sources, but he knew how to project that onto the stage. So we can say that his efforts actually they are all marked by youthfulness, or what we call as the exuberance of imagination. And of course he was supported by the what we call as the extravagance of language that is also there. So he knew how to use the medium of poetry, the verse as such in English language. And from there, from around 1595 to 1600, there is something called a period of growth and development. So here we have what we call as, this period can be marked by what we call as the development of the artist. We have what we call as some sophistication that is happening. Maybe use of better plot, or maybe a complete understanding of human nature. All these come into play. And I'm sure those who are watching me will surely agree with me that some of the ideas that I'm going to speak at the beginning are common, because Shakespeare is somebody who is popular throughout the world. He has been adapted to various languages, and he is one of the, I should say, the highest sought after writer as far as common readers are concerned. So everyone will find something that will satisfy his or her inclination towards literature, because when they read Shakespeare, they will get something unique about that person, in the sense maybe a character, a situation, and all that. So when we read the early comedies in general, especially the early part of his life, you can see that he makes use of a variety of themes, and there is this curious blend of the tragic and the comic. So within the play itself, you have this, you have the tragedy and comedy, in the sense the vein of tragedy happening within the what we call as comic scenes. And of course, you have continuous action, a drama of action, we can call it like that. And he was not bothered, as we all know, he doesn't bother about the three unities. Generally, we talk about three unities. And he has also understood how to use the medium in such a way that he employed what we call as the subplot, or we can call it as underplot, or whatever it be, so that it goes, this will go along with the main theme. Now, this is what we see at the beginning of his career. But certain interesting insights can be uh, derived out of his plays, especially when you look into the plays starting from 1589, say Comedy of Errors, and up to around 1602, where he wrote All is Well that Ends Well. So if you look into the plays, the sequence starting from Comedy of Errors to All is Well that Ends Well, you can see that there is something called a progression that is happening regarding the craft of the writer. It's a unique kind of a thing that one can understand regarding the development of a master called Shakespeare. The thing is, in Comedy of Errors, it has been calculated, like there are now websites available on that, and we all know, by reading a play like Comedy of Errors, it has only 11 scenes, and hardly it has around 14,701 words, a total of 14,701 words total. So that it's a short play compared to the later plays. But next, in 1593, when he wrote the next comedy called Taming of the Shrew, 11 scenes became 12. In the sense there are 12 scenes, and the number of words went beyond 20,000. And when you look into a play like Two Gentlemen of Verona, it had 20 scenes and more than 15,000 or around 20,000 words. So like that, when you look into the progression, when you look into each and every play that he has written, you can see that there is an advancement in the number of scenes, number of characters, and number of words. No, I'm not here to support my argument through statistical details. I'm telling you, this can give us an idea about how far he has invested his time and the way that he has understood how to employ the characters in a given situation by increasing the number of scenes or the duration of the scenes. In Midsummer Night's Dream, the total number of words is, I should say, it goes beyond 21,000, but the number of scenes are restricted. Means it's only hardly 10, 9 or 10. But here, please note, one thing that we need to understand here is by the time the play that I'm focusing here, like Merry Wives of Windsor, you will see that there are 23 scenes and more than 20,000 words. So what I want to propose here as an argument is a young Shakespeare who's immature, who was just to, like I should say, who has just started experimenting with theater, started with simple themes, simple plots, and simple, like kind of restricted number of scenes. The same writer, when he became mature by around 1600, he knew how to use the stage. He knew how to use the stage in the sense he knew how to devise the how to arrange the character, how to place them in different situations, main plot, subplots, and you can see in Midsummer Night's Dream it actually moves on to different levels, 3 to 4 levels, from a common level to the in the sense level where in which we have fairies and all, and in the and in all is when that ends well. It is considered as a comedy where we have the highest number of words. It goes around 23,000. So why I said all this, because you can have you can have a clear picture of how far Shakespeare has evolved as far as the treatment of the subject, especially comedies, over a period of time. Well, the same thing can be applied when we look into the passage of time from 1590s to 16 maybe 10. When you look into histories and tragedies, the same progression can be understood or analyzed. But I am concentrating, or I am restricting myself here to the comedies. That is why I'm referring to those statistics. Well, statistics, maybe it look mathematical, but it is important to understand how far he has invested his time to design a play. Now, when we look into the trends, as we can see, the trends of a romantic comedy, starting from a comedy of errors, you can see that it has, generally we have what we call as a main plot and a subplot. Especially by around 1604, he knew how to use the plots. So in a comedy, we can easily understand that there is an eligible aristocratic youth, and he falls in love with a woman, and then but they can't get married, for some reason or the other. So maybe it can be something like incompatibility as far as the social standards are concerned, or maybe families are concerned. There could be what we call as a quarrel between those two families, but they are in love. That is the most important thing. So love is the major thing there. The theme that runs through the comedies, love, and then they knew how to like bypass that, the problems that they face, and finally they end up with marriage. The entire thing completes or culminates. The play culminates with the marriage, and you have a general celebration or a prospect of a celebration that is going to happen. So as we can see, there are so many studies that have gone into the structure of comedies and tragedies. Comedies, as you all know, it begins with a tinge of sorrow, and then it ends up with joy, celebration, marriage, and all that. Whereas in tragedies, it's a very common thing. You all know that. Whereas in tragedies, it all begins with, maybe in the case of Hamlet, you have a marriage actually, but it ends up with sorrow, in the sense dead bodies on the stage. Now that way we can see how the structure has been determined those days. So comedies, as you can see, the setting of a typical romantic comedy, they are all happening not in a proper place, as we call it, as every time as a city. It goes, they go to remote places, maybe a forest, maybe a fairy tale kind of a city, a setting there. And you have the image of nature, very important, like an English countryside. It's cool weather, a very what we call as an amiable kind of a feeling, a good season there. You have this beautiful sky, sunrise, dawn, rain and wind, everything all happening, like rivers, animal, birds. Now, these words are used to convince the audience that the season is like that. It is the right time to fall in love. That's all. It's that is how they create. The setting is created through what we call as a rich language, and they move out of the court when the marriage is being obstructed, and they go to a place something like an ideal pastoral setting which encourages love and fertility. Now this is happening there. So this kind of thing that happens in the movement of the play. So romantic comedies, as we all know, so starting from the early days, Shakespeare's approach when he wrote a romantic comedy, he always found a formula like this. It should happen not inside a court or an aristocratic time, or a setting. It should go beyond all that. It should be an ideal kind of a setting. And at the same time, he knew the people who are going to watch the play. So in order to comply with the taste of the public, the common man, he brought in the idea of the clowns. The idea of the clowns. So you have fools, you have clowns, all like running a riot on the stage. The reason is very simple. Now, when we look into that from the perspective of what we call as the morality plays, generally clowns and fools, they are all direct, I should say, descendant of the devil or the vice. Interesting. But the clown and the fool, they are all used. They have something to perform on the stage because they have to do some work. Because it's not just matter of fun every time. They crack jokes, they have wits, they play pranks each other or on other characters. Sometimes they speak philosophically. Sometimes they can become vehement critics of the society. They sometimes perform as the chorus in a Greek tragedy. They like narrate the events before, maybe what all things that had happened there. So actually, what Shakespeare thought was they need to be not laughed at. People should not laugh at them, but laugh with them. So when they play, that is a very important thing. But at times there are characters. For example, a character like Malvolio, you have a satire there, a notion of satire. So it is something like a lash-like satire, something that we find now almost intolerable. But generally, as we can understand, they are servants of the principal characters, the main characters. So they appear on stage, they interact, they support. At the same time, they play with the words. We all know pun, for example. Vulgar jokes are common, or they have what we call as the word jugglery. Now, that is even there in Hamlet. I understand. I do appreciate that. But we have characters like Sir John Falstaff, Bottom, Dogberry, and Verges. We have so many interesting characters on stage, like revealing themselves and reveling. They are always in a state of celebration, especially in the early part of his career, up to around 1600. Now, at the same time, I told you there is a subplot going on along with the main plot. So you have people of the lower strata of the society, like a servant or a constable or a mechanical or something like that, and they also play a part. They may not be a very important character, but they have to play a part, and they sometimes complicate the plot, or sometimes they sort out the problems. These things happen in Shakespeare's, what we call as comic plays. So in short, one can say that there are points where the main plot and the subplot interact, and at the end, everyone, whether they are aristocrats or not, they are all joining the celebration. So as we need to know, even the root word comedy, we need to know that, in the Greek civilization, when you have the word comedia, a commodia there, and the word komos. Actually, komos means to revel or a kind of a carousel there. And it came from, or maybe you can also indicate that it came from the word kom, Kome, which means what? Village. So there is always this a hint of rustic kind of a background whenever we talk about, and Shakespeare must have used in that particular sense when he made use of these themes in the context of what we call as early comedies. And of course, one cannot fully neglect what is going on now. Say, for example, in the criticism, as one can say, one can bring in the idea what Derrida has observed. In his essay titled Plato's Pharmacy, Derrida actually observes that pharmacon is a double-edged remedy. Pharmacon. Now, where in which it is said that it can never be simply beneficial every time. So you can see that in Antony and Cleopatra, for example, there is this reference: with a wound I must be cured. Now, there is this, it's given in the fourth act, if I'm right, fourth act. And that means the logic of for pharmacon is present. That is, the wound is essential. The wound is essential to the cure. So this, what we call as dialectic, is part of the structure of any writing. So that is what the idea of pharmacos is. When you apply that into the treatment of the subject in comedies and tragedies, especially comedies, we can see that there is something which is inside and outside this particular order. Now, when we look into that, there is this conflict going on between these two, the wound and the cure. Means you have what we call as at one level a very important idea that within the idea of curing a wound is essential. So sometimes there is this pain within the comedy, so that when it heals many. Not just the person, it heals many. But sometimes it can move out of the social code. There are exceptions. That's what Derrida is interested about. There are exceptions. For example, the figure of Shylock, the figure of Malvolio. No, they are shattered by their what we call as reversal of fortune. No, but at the same time, we have Falstaff. Of course, it has been revived in the play that I'm trying to focus on. But generally, we can see that in romantic comedies, people like Portia, Beatrice, Rosalind, Olivia, they all emerge what we call as victorious. They found a cure. At the same time, there is a wound which is part of the narrative in terms of Shylock, in terms of Don John, or in terms of Malvolio. This is also happening. So what we have to identify here is this element of the scapegoat is also part of the narrative in Shakespearean comedies, especially when you analyze that. Now, moving on to the title that I proposed, please note, it is the main character. We all know the main character is, of course, Falstaff. And the people will have a feeling that why Falstaff is not part of the title. Yes, he is not part of the title. The play is centered every time, no, not always, I should say, around Falstaff, but it is around women, the merry wives. So they are the, I should say, the triggering factors, or we can also say they are the engines that drive the action of the play, and they seem to be, like celebrating that, relishing that. So this aspect has been of great discussion throughout. So there is, we all know, for example, an eminent writer, Margaret Cavendish. She says Cleopatra she says is one of the most important character in the paradigm. When you look into the entire gamut of what we call as the Shakespearean creations, especially women, female characters. Now, Cavendish has listed out a few important. Of course, the first one is Cleopatra. But secondly, after that, the next four all come from Merry Wives of Windsor. Merry Wives. So all four cats, say Nan Page, Mrs. Page, Mrs. Ford, and the doctor's maid. So that is why I said these women actually dominate the proceedings of this particular play, and we don't know how far that is being appreciated. But one needs to understand, or one needs to focus on the fact that women do get represented with with all its kind of, I should say, importance and significance and a lot of emphasis, I should say, regarding their what we call as abilities to play with the situations in life. Whereas now let us move on to let us focus now on to Falstaff. Now what happens with that particular person? We all know Falstaff as part of the history plays. I should say the Henry IV plays. Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2. And we know how he has been treated, how he has been projected, the kind of wit. And as you all know, in Henry IV Part 1, the representation of women, if you look into the list of characters, in Henry IV, the representation of women is quite less. In Henry IV Part 2, it is slightly better, but not many. In Henry V, because there is the Queen, there is Catherine, you have Catherine who speaks in French. Now, because of that, one can say that women is slowly and slowly emerging. But when you, at the same time, it is inversely proportional as far as Falstaff is concerned, because by the time Henry V came out, Falstaff is almost absent. There is only a reporting of what has happened to Falstaff. Now, when you it is considered generally as a humiliation. As because earlier we have a mighty character called Falstaff who would control everything. Now, when this character was revived in this particular play called The Merry Wives of Windsor, what has happened is people, especially serious critics who read Shakespeare, they found that this is not the kind of Falstaff that they have read in Henry IV Part 1 and Henry IV Part 2. That is, means it has changed utterly. The character has transformed. It's a new Falstaff. That is what people used to say, especially when you look into the history of Falstaff. They say the Falstaff of Merry Wives is actually another matter. It's a different character altogether. So critics were, of course, they were all captivated by the Falstaff of the history plays. But interestingly, when it came to, say, Henry IV Part 2 or Henry V, he's still there. Maybe in Henry V he's not visible, but he's present. But whereas in it is a new person altogether, a new kind of a new variety of Falstaff coming up. So that is something which people are familiar with. And a critic called Hartley Coleridge, he says it is actually an imposter, not the real Falstaff. He says the Falstaff of Merry Wives is not the Falstaff of Henry IV. It is a big-bellied imposter, assuming his name and style, or at its best, it is Falstaff in dotage. It was written way back in 1851. This comment was made. Similarly, the same thing has been said by Edward Dowden. He has also made a comment in the same way that it's already a new kind of a phenomenon actually when it came to the Merry Wives. Similarly, we all revere the name of A.C. Bradley. He also made the same kind of an allegation, I should say. These two people are separate. So he says, to picture the real Falstaff, be fooled like the Falstaff of Merry Wives. So it's like imagining, he says, the Iago, the gull of Rodrigo. That is what the comment was. And Bradley wrote that in 1909, A.C. Bradley. But the tradition continued up to even around 1998 when Harold Bloom wrote his introduction, a three or maybe a 3.5 page chapter on Merry Wives. He says that the character called Falstaff in the Merry Wives of Windsor is a nameless impostor masquerading as the great Sir John Falstaff. So he says, Bloom concluded that I shall call him pseudo Falstaff throughout this brief discussion. That is what he has said way back in 1998. Look at that. After 90 years, it's all the same. The approach is all the same by the critic because they don't want to bring these two people together. They say they are of not the identical mold altogether. They are all different. These two characters are different. The treatment is different. So one can say one is the antithesis of the other. So now, what is happening there? What is the problem with the Falstaff that we find in the Merry Wives of Windsor? Now, that is the thing. Now, one problem that maybe objective kind of critic would say is that you all know the meaning of the term idolatry means worshipping the idol. Now, similarly, there is another terminology that they have created. It is called bardolatory. Bard means, of course, Shakespeare. Bardolator. They say, considering the kind of genius that Shakespeare carried, Falstaff that we find in Merry Wives of Windsor cannot be equated because there they found some kind of imperfections. And some say he has written the play something like within a matter of days. And it is taken as a kind of a written based on some kind of a pressure. The pressure we all know, as we all know, there is a rumor or a story that the play was written at Queen Elizabeth's command. And because the Queen was so pleased with this character, the admirable character of Falstaff in Henry IV plays, it is said that she wants to find out how Falstaff will emerge in a play when he has fallen in love. So Shakespeare in Love, we all know the film there. So here we have a desire or maybe a demand on the part of the Queen to find out what would be the kind of Falstaff that we can see, a new kind of a Falstaff if he has fallen in love. Because we all know the kind of Falstaff that is there in Henry IV and part 1 and part 2 because he is into all sorts of mischiefs in life, like all sorts of pranks, or maybe you can call it as debauchery or whatever it be. Now that is there, but here we have a new kind of. So it is said that Shakespeare must have finished writing the play in 14 days. We don't know, but this is what is generally thought about or generally considered. Like they say, Shakespeare wrote in a matter of 14 days. So for the sake of the Queen, now that is one of the reasons they say there is this defect that they have found in the character of Falstaff. And they say, some people said both the theories can be rejected. Like, why should we blame the Queen? Why should we blame the writer there? No. They all reject that. They say, it is like, why don't we treat him as somebody who is original, somebody who is unique? Now, you have a play wherein which the female power has been taken into consideration with that amount of strength by which you can't have a brave hero who is actually kept as an antithesis to a woman who is who wants to play a prank on the stage, or maybe who wants to have some kind of mechanization, or maybe some kind of what we call as playing with somebody like in terms of what wit or maybe doing some prank, etc. No, it is not. It may not go well with the audience. So what they say is that is purposefully why Falstaff has been, because Falstaff is already a particular icon or a cult that they found is it's useful, because if he is there, nobody will be bothered. Maybe that is one of the interpretation that they come up with. So now there are critics like, for example, Louis Porter, and the critic has observed that Falstaff has never been as well liked by women as by men, because he expects women to wait on him, to have sex with him from time to time, or maybe lend him money. That was the kind of thing. It is written by Louis Porter in 2012. So, in such a kind of a world, we want to have a drama where women needs to dominate men. That is the purpose why we have Falstaff is there. So that is another kind of interpretation possible for this particular comedy or a drama. And of course, there are people, for example, Felix Schelling or Frederick Engels. They all say that it's a wonderful play. So because they find something really admirable about this particular film, means the fantasy that is generally attached with this play is something unique. So that is why Frederick Engels would say the first act of Merry Wives of Windsor alone contains more life and reality than all German literature. Imagine Frederick Engels claiming that, that is the kind of impact he had. And this was stated way back in 1873. And moreover, historians who are interested in English classes and English conditions, English societies, and English geographical locations in literature, they take this play very seriously. They say it is not just about it is not about court or courtship, or it is not about women-men relations. There are real references to places, and those places are still there after 600 years in a new form. That's all. But much, of course, geographically it has changed. The space has changed a lot, but still it is identifiable where Shakespeare has set the play actually. So the setting is something that you can find or identify through what we call as historical kind of excavation, or at least in the text itself. So that way there is something called a renewed attention there. So some kind of a lot of studies are going on regarding this play now. So earlier, we had a feeling that this play has become out of date, no relevance, nothing. But now people have started looking at this play with a renewed kind of an attention. And this play, Merry Wives, is about actually feeling like an outsider to a community. Like you have a character who is within the play. I don't want to tell you or narrate the story of Windsor, because Merry Wives of Windsor, I believe most of you know this. Maybe I can refer to the main characters, maybe at the end of this particular representation, or maybe something like a plot summary. I don't know whether it is required. I believe it is something that you can find out in the Wikipedia or any other source for that matter. But Shakespeare's Falstaff, especially in this particular play, we can consider that he is a paragon of human weakness or foibles. He's a paragon of all that. And he is the figure, interestingly, most alien to the play's community. Now, that is what the problem is. Now, you have a character who is very much within the play, at the same time, he's not part of the play, which is again, dramatically, I should say, a new kind of an experiment. Now, he's part of the action, at the same time, he's far removed from what we understand as social reality, because he is living at another kind of a level. Now, and his psychological kind of an approach is because he has been punished twice. He has been made fun of by these women at least twice or thrice, but still he takes it as a matter of an enjoyment. Maybe you can call him gullible, but it is taken as a matter of enjoyment. Interesting. And he doesn't have any complaint. Now, in one scene, actually, he is taken in a kind of a basket. If it is possible, I'll read that particular part. He is taken in a buck basket, and he reports to Ford. Of course, he has come with a different kind of an identity, and he says, a buck basket rammed me in with foul shirts and smocks, socks, foul stockings, greasy napkins. That, Mr. Brooke, there was the rankest compound of villainous smell that ever offended nostril. And he says, and the other man asks, and how long lay you there? How like the hours that you were there? Interestingly, the basket was then thrown into the river. It was thrown into the river Thames, and there, I was drifting. He said, and again, interestingly, he says, well, he doesn't have any complaints over that. So he recounts all that experiences, but he still doesn't have any kind of what we call as a complaint over that. It's a new kind of a false stuff, which is not there. So which cannot be appreciated by the kind of stereotyped the hero worship that we find in the 16th century or maybe late 15th century or that kind of Elizabethan audience. Here is a Falstaff who is vulnerable to his kind of policies that he has, his own weaknesses. At the same time, he enjoys that also, which is unique. So why? Why this? What is it about Falstaff? So you have this. Why this larger than life figure? So memorable and so prone to take up residence in our hearts and imagination. That is what the thing is. Generally, people ask. So you have a person who is bound to committed to hedonism, pleasures in life, seeking pleasures in life, and then he has his own weaknesses. He has obesity, he has alcoholism, lack of money, we can call it poverty, and perhaps sometimes feeling that he has been rejected by the community, one's own community. But interestingly, he is like every time he comes up, there is no, and that is what he says. We have a love for that person. Still, he is ready to like forget all that, and so we find something like we find something like childlike kind of a thing regarding this particular character. Now, one important observation that came in 2020, which is recent, I should say, almost 2 years now, in the volume called Oxfordian, volume 22. I would certainly suggest please read that article. It is written by Richard Wogeman. He's a clinical professor at psychiatry at Georgetown University, and he has around 185 publications, and out of that, I would say around 85 around Shakespeare. Now he has written a wonderful article on Falstaff, and he is asking a question: is Falstaff a portrait of Henry VIII? Henry VIII. And we all know who Henry VIII is, father of Queen Elizabeth. Now there is something about Falstaff. There is something about, I should say, Henry VIII in Falstaff. That's what, like this doctor would argue. Because you can find that, I told you about obesity. Now you have a person with what we call as persistent hyperphagia. Hyperphagia means overeating. Now, the same thing has been reported about Henry VIII. So I'm trying to report from the article, which is very insightful. Now, from a psychological perspective, from a medical perspective, I think nothing much has been written. Of course, there are like assumptions, but here we have clear-cut what we call as comparisons between the documents that are available regarding Henry VIII and the textual kind of documents that are available related to Falstaff. I'm sorry. And it is said, for example, Henry VIII is he is reportedly 6 feet 2 inches in height. 6 feet 2 inches. And the thing is, By the time he became old, and he weighed around 390 pounds. So it is he is he was such a massive kind of means fat kind of a person, by which it is reported that he needed a hoist, a support to mount his horse. And once the horse couldn't carry that person, it is said it fell down. Along with that, he also had to he got like I should say trapped under the feet of the horse, and he had a head injury. And it is said that because maybe one of the reasons why he became such a kind of a person, that he is such a shifty mood of a person of shifty moods and temperament. The reason they attribute is the head injury that he had. At the same time, please note, just as Falstaff Henry was, when we compare the textual Falstaff and the historical Henry the Eighth, it's all depending on, I base myself in that particular article. Now, you have Henry VIII, one who spoke French and Latin fluently. He is well read, and he was fascinated with what we call as scientific instruments, maps, astronomy, and his personal library had around 1,500 books. So, and at the beginning of his life, he was extrovert, bubbly, charming, like affable, all that. But later on, when he became what we call as infirm, and when he got into treatment, he became like ill-tempered. That is one, and the same kind of progress one can see according to historical, or maybe like based on historical narrative and the textual evidence. One can see a comparison between Falstaff and Henry VIII, and even in a particular play. Now, for I would say Henry II, Part Two. I'm sorry, Henry the Fourth, Part Two. There is this line like, "What says the doctor to my water?" Means his urine. Now, interestingly, the same thing was done with Henry the Eighth, according to this doctor. That the physician's role, when the treatment started, the physician's role was to monitor Henry's health. And what is that? Measuring his urine against his comparing or against his fluid intake and examining his stools. Now, I am referring to that article. So, if you are interested, you can deal with that or you can read that. Now, I would say that the evidence that the doctor has got is from the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. It's a unique archive of almost all famous persons in the Great Britain. So it's a national biography. So if you are interested, you can go to the site also. And regarding the play, I don't know whether I need to go on to the details of what the play is all about. I think I'm sorry. I think I can skip the part in which you have this kind of what we call as narration of story. So I believe the main the people there. You have this Sir John Falstaff. I told you about the person whom he interacted. He is called Frank Ford, and you have his wife Alice Ford. You have George Page and his wife Mrs. Page. We call it that, Mrs. Page or Margaret Page. We have Annie Page as his daughter, and William Page as son. We have Robert Shallow. We have Hugh Evans, Fenton, who's a suitor to Miss Annie Page. We have Abraham Slender, and we have Cass. And all these are there. And of course, the main interesting character, which is part of Falstaff development of his what we call as literary life. We have this Madam Quickly, his housekeeper, and of course his two pages, I should say, an associate, Pistol and Nim, and there are some assistants also. Now all these all these together create a wonderful play called the Merry Wives. So if it is possible, please see that through YouTube, or at least watch that. Or read the play. It's a very interesting kind of a play, though, for those who have not read. And it begins with the interesting part of this play is there isn't much of gloom throughout. The end of the play is a kind of a celebration, and Mrs. Page actually invites Falstaff to join the festivities. The last part is like that. So even though we have a series of jokes that are played actually on Falstaff, and there is even one public humiliation for Falstaff, because it's part of the pageant being enacted by the residents of the town. So now, interestingly, he accepts the punishment all will. And what is the problem? The thing is, he wants money. So he actually, at the beginning of the play, it is interesting. He arrives in Windsor for the sake of money. So in order to sort out that problem, he decides that Falstaff decides that he would court two wealthy married women. Now, that is his plan. So that is how the plot begins, and soon he writes letters to these two married women, and because they are intelligent, soon they came to realize they are identical letters written by the same person. So from there, the entire comedy begins. The problem there is one something like plot, main plot, and a subplot. One of the husbands, I should say, or say the husband of, for example, Page, he doesn't take that as a serious kind of a thing. He was not serious about it. But for husband of Mrs. Ford, Mr. Ford, he didn't like that. So from there you have what we call as the humiliation of what we call as humiliation of Falstaff. Now, this happens throughout the play. So that's what I said. It's a very short kind of a plot, but it has been interestingly divided into scenes. So 23 scenes in total, and more than 20,000 words. It's a big that way. It's a big volume, but uh, never do we feel bored with that. Like one after the other, you have some even of the other, and lot of what we call as give and take happening among or between characters. So that way, I would suggest that you can go through that and get more information. So what towards the say while I try to conclude my discussion, I would say that this kind of an insight into a new kind of a Falstaff, this kind of a possible insight of reading the play in a different dimension, the way that we can identify Falstaff in relation with Henry the Eighth. Now, all those are, I should say, something that we need to focus on, and we need to revisit, and try to find out how far Shakespeare is still relevant. The reason is he has left two versions of Falstaff, and so when we look into the early part of his career, Henry the Fourth Part One and Part Two, and Henry the Fifth, and then later on, after 4 to 5 years, you have a new Falstaff reappearing on stage and giving a new version of his character. Now, all these can be gone through once again. So every time, as I said, at the beginning of the discussion, Shakespeare is that way quite interesting, because every time we get something new about that particular writer, something interesting about that writer. Whatever be the theory that we try to apply, whether it is reconstruction or new historicism, or whatever be the theory that we try or apply on the text, or whatever the way that directors of various languages and films, be it Japanese or be it Bollywood or Hollywood, you have new and new readings of Shakespeare happening. So the essential Shakespeare is quite, I should say, dynamic in the sense it can still provide lots of insights into human character, and it can also give us ideas about how to deal with the text based on that particular century. So the way that a 16th century or a 17th century person read Shakespeare can be totally different the way that we approach that in this 21st century. So I would say I've stopped there for the time being. It's almost 1 hour. I have told the organizers about that, because it will be something like a 1 hour lecture. I'll surely take questions which are part of what we have discussed. I'm happy that you're all there. So thank you, and I invite you for a brief discussion.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an absorbing, engrossing, and multifaceted discourse. You brought into light the different aspects of Shakespearean comedies. It indeed was an enlightening journey which proves that Shakespearean comedies are still so very relevant to all of us. You pointed out that the creativity of Shakespeare, his projection on the stage, his efforts, his imagination, his usage of poetry to bring out a beautiful piece of art. We also came to know his development as an artist. We, you clearly brought into light his employing of characters, scenes, duration of scenes, his invested time and efforts in designing of a play. His themes of love, marriage, celebration, joy, all are bound together beautifully. Setting that he employ portrays imageries, right time to fall in love, ideal pastoral settings, and even a minor character such as clown are not always to entertain but also to act as a social critic. They are not to be laughed at but should be laughed along with them. The wound, treatment, conflict between these two healing process that he is not only the main character but also it heals the entire community that is in process, the people who are involved in the process. Thank you so much, sir, for introducing us with this unexplored area of Shakespearean comedies.
Thank
Moving
you.
forward to yeah, th- moving forward to our question and answer session, I would ask participants to unmute themselves and ask questions.
Sir, I had a question. I have a question.
Yeah. Please go ahead, sir.
What is your attitude or what is your reaction towards using Shakespeare in daily life? Like, what if someone uses Shakespeare's word or Shakespeare lines in daily life, and you know some kind of uh, what if he uses Shakespeare in his daily life? What do you think about it?
Yeah, but Shakespeare as such is, especially from the literary perspective, he is an icon all by himself. So what I would suggest is now Shakespeare is not just one kind of a monolithic kind of a structure. There are multiple dimensions, and when you quote Shakespeare, when you bring the ideas of Shakespeare, please note, actually Shakespeare is not speaking directly. Shakespeare is speaking for the character, and each character will approach life in his or her terms. So that is the greatness of the writer. Something that we find in, for example, Russian writer Dostoevsky. So you have it is not like they are all focusing on one philosophy. They are all looking at life from the same angle. No, they are all looking at life from different perspectives. That is why we have the internal conflict that is going on, which is quite like strong. The conflict is strong and vehement, and that feeling will immediately reach the audience, because here is a person who speaks from a particular perspective, and sooner or later you have another character opposing him or her, and then suddenly, when you quote him, the problem is you take only one aspect of it. So you miss the picture there, the totality there, the one aspect of it, or one particular dimension, so maybe the complete dimension. So my idea is, when we use Shakespeare as part of our daily thought process, or thinking, or maybe using his words, lines, his philosophy, please don't forget that he has written that for the purpose of a particular characters, maybe the angle of suffering, the angle of the idea, or so for example, he must have been enlightened by some kind of a tradition. Now, that is why, for example, you have Salim Ali using that particular expression, "fall of a sparrow." So, taken from Hamlet, for example, the title of his book, Salim Ali, the one of the famous ornithologists. Now, this quote, or this one expression, I should say, three or four words, that actually is a way of giving tribute to the great thinking of Shakespeare, which he has expressed through Hamlet. So we have relevance of Shakespeare, we do have relevance of other writers also, provided the perspective should not be missed out. When we quote Shakespeare, we need to understand that we are quoting his character and his perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Smita here. So I have a question. As you mentioned about the characters of fools and clowns, uh, they gave philosophical speeches or were vehement critics and had witty dialogues in the play. Um, you also mentioned that they are not supposed to be laughed at, but laughed with. Ironically enough, they are called clowns or fools throughout Shakespearean comedies. So, sir, do you think is there a hidden motive of Shakespeare behind doing so?
Why do you call it as hidden motive, if so that I can get clarity in the question?
Yes, sir. Sir, because he never wanted to criticize it openly. Maybe, for example, in this play, criticize King Henry the Eighth. But at the same time, he wanted to, give that kind of a voice to a character. So I am asking that was there a hidden motive behind it?
Smita ma'am, I think you have answered the question already. Now,
Yeah,
what I
I
would
mean,
suggest,
yeah. Do
yeah,
you
you have,
second
you
my
have. Like,
opinion? That is what I
the
wanted
sense,
to ask.
I'll move ahead. I'll try to discuss that ahead. The thing is, see, the way that you have expressed it was done quite brilliantly. Now, what I would suggest is, see, you cannot exactly reproduce, especially those are the days where we have the monarchy going on. So you don't have the facility to criticize because it's not democracy. So naturally, you need to have some kind of expression by which you need to have some accepted stereotypes or norms or what we call as some characters on stage which are given license to like express themselves, and nobody is bothered because for us they are just clowns. So when we talk about say for example Fry, for example, in myth criticism or archetypes, we study that, and they are given a kind of a license by which they can easily criticize anyone. They are bound to do that. So it's a way of expression, it's a way of understanding the world through them. So they have a role to play, and they are the only way to express many things, because if the main character speaks naturally, the guilt will fall on the writer, because here is a person who purposefully tries to tarnish the image of the queen or the king. But here it is something like a joke, a popular joke, and popular joke will have its own kind of an impact on the society, because it's a statement which is already there, which is already spread, and people have already accepted that, but they don't speak that openly. Now, this is happening in democracy, for example. It is still going on in our society. We know it, but we don't speak about that. Now, that way, there are some levels in which, and we are happy that such characters like rule the stage even in those days to say something about some private life, some affairs, so that nobody they know what is happening, but they don't. Now the same thing is I'm sorry, the same thing is happening in Hamlet, for example, like when you have the king killing his brother on the stage through drama. Actually, when you look into the film or the narratives created after that, you can see that the entire people are looking at Claudius. Now, what is the reaction is all about? The hint is very simple, because is it directly referring to Claudius? And Claudius suddenly realizes that the people are, or the people may suspect his involvement in the crime. So he is leaving, and he says he needs what we call as lights. He goes out of the stage. Now that confirms his involvement for Horatio and Hamlet, but not for others. But in a way, I should say, when people are looking at him and the people around, the queen may not know, but people are very much aware about what is happening. what I would suggest is this is the way that clowns are openly doing. It is a fun element. There is a fun element it is all fun and frolic. We all accept that. At the same time, there is this element of criticism indirectly given, and they are given the space. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I'm still a student, so trying to understand the text at subtextual levels. And
Yeah, we are all in a way, students. Okay, fine.
no, no, sir. I am a student of Hislop
Okay,
College. I'm
fine,
doing
fine.
MA second year.
Okay,
So
okay,
don't
good,
call me
good.
ma'am.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Best
you
of
for your engaging lecture.
best
Thank
of
you so
best
much.
of luck.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else who wants to put up a question? Any other participant want to ask a question? I hope all your questions has been answered then, and the subject is clear to you. Let's move forward. It's time to part ways until we meet tomorrow again, same time, same place, with another scholarly discourse. But before that, I would like to propose a vote of thanks. And to begin with this, I would like to extend my gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Murli Krishnan, who agreed to be the part of this short-term Shakespearean certificate course, and for enlightening us with his scholastic discourse. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
I would like to earnestly thank President of this certificate course, Dr. Pranoti Chakravarti, Madam, who always encourages us under her able guidance. We are grateful to the Secretary of Shakespeare Society of Central India, Dr. Usha Sakure, for all the hard work she has put in to arrange the entire session of 8 days Shakespeare certificate course for the benefit of the students. I also would like to extend my thanks to all the principals and organizers connected together in this event. Dr. Umila Davir ma'am, Dr. Prashant Shedke sir, Dr. Priya Vanjari madam, Dr. Vikas Dhomne sir, for providing their unexhausted and never-ending support in making this program a success. Thanks is also due to all the coordinators, Dr. Veena Joseph, Dr. Nihal Sheikh sir, Dr. Madhvi Mohral ma'am, Dr. Karthik Panikkar for your efforts. I also would like to thank our participants for being patient listener and being active participants of this program. Now I call today's session to end. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.